At the time, there was no HOA yet. No board members, no meetings, no rules. Just developers trying to finish a project. So they agreed immediately. Everything was signed and recorded legally. And just like that, the roads that would later run through the entire neighborhood remained mine. Years passed. The development was finished. Families moved in. An HOA was formed. Homes were sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I never moved inside the community. Instead, I stayed just outside the neighborhood in a small house hidden behind a line of old trees. I didn't use the HOA's amenities. I didn't attend their meetings. And I certainly didn't follow their rules. Legally, I didn't have to. For years, that arrangement caused no problems. Until a new HOA board took control. That's when everything changed. One morning I walked out to my mailbox and saw something bright orange taped to it. A violation notice. It read, unauthorized vehicle parking, HOA violation. I stared at it for a moment, confused. My truck had been parked on the road the night before it at my road. I pulled the notice off the mailbox and laughed quietly. Someone must be new, I muttered. I crumpled it up and threw it away. But 3 days later, another notice appeared. Then another, this time it included a fine, $150, escalating to $500 if the violation continued. That's when I decided to deal with it directly. I walked into the HOA office calmly and politely. The woman at the front desk barely looked up. When I spoke, I've been receiving parking violations, I said. I don't live in the HOA. She sighed like she'd heard that excuse 100 times. If you're parking on HOA streets, she said flatly, you're subject to HOA rules. I smiled. I'm not parking on HOA streets, she frowned. Yes? You are no, I replied calmly. I own them. That's when the atmosphere changed, not confusion. Not curiosity, pure disbelief. She actually laughed. Sir, she said slowly, everyone says that when they don't want to pay fines. I'm not everyone, I answered. She crossed her arms. If you don't comply with HOA regulations, she said. We will involve law enforcement. I shrugged. You're welcome to try. She picked up the phone. And surprisingly, they did. Within minutes, 2 police patrol cars arrived. Neighbors peeked through windows. Some stepped onto their porches pretending to check their mail. The HOA president was already there when officers arrived. A middle-aged man named Chris Polo. Clipboard tucked under his arm like it was some kind of badge of authority. He immediately pointed. At me, this man is trespassing and refusing to follow HOA regulations. One officer turned to me. Sir, do you live in this community? No, then why are you parked here? Because this road belongs to me. The HOA president scoffed loudly. See, that's exactly what I told you he'd say. The officer looked at me carefully. Sir, do you have proof of ownership? I nodded. Absolutely. I walked to my truck and opened the glove compartment. Inside was a folder I'd carried for years, copies of the property deeds. I handed them over. The officer read the documents slowly. Then he read them again. His posture changed. The second officer leaned closer. What is it? He asked. The first officer replied quietly. Roadway parcel ownership deeds. The HOA president stepped forward. That's impossible, he said. Quickly. Those roads belong to the HOA? The officer looked up at him. No, he said calmly. They don't. The color drained from a man's face. You maintain them under an easement agreement, the officer continued. But you don't own them. The second officer handed my documents back. Sir, he said, you're not violating anything. Then he turned toward the HOA president. And you should stop issuing fines immediately. But embarrassment rarely ends conflicts. Sometimes it only makes people more determined to win. Within a week, the HOA escalated the situation. Certified letters started arriving. Threats of towing. Threats of liens. Threats of lawsuits. Then one morning I walked outside and saw something that made my coffee nearly spill. New metal signs had been installed along the roads. No parking HOA enforced violators will be towed. They had put them on my roads. That was the moment disbelief turned into anger, because now they weren't just mistaken. They were challenging ownership, and they were about to learn the difference between authority and actual control. That evening I parked my truck exactly where I always did, and waited. At around 6:40 p.m., a tow truck rolled into the neighborhood. Amber lights flashing. Neighbors gathered again. Phones recording everything. The driver stepped out. "You the owner of this truck?" "Yes, you're parked in a no parking zone enforced by the HOA, he said. "I've got an order to tow." I handed him the same documents. He read them once, then again. His shoulders dropped. "You own the roads?" "Yes." He glanced toward the HOA office, then back at me. "I'm not towing this," he said, and drove away. Across the street, the HOA president watched everything, got angry. Not embarrassed. Not apologetic. Just furious. The next day, they sent lawyers. But that turned out to be their biggest mistake, because my attorney read their letter and immediately smiled. "This is bad," he said. "For me?" I asked. "For them. By installing signs on land they didn't own and attempting to enforce authority they didn't have, the HOA had opened itself to serious legal trouble. Trespassing, harassment, interference with property rights." My lawyer sent one response letter, just one. It included proof of ownership and a cease and desist demand. 3 days later, everything changed. The signs disappeared. The fines vanished. The notices stopped. Then the HOA sent a message to every homeowner in the community. The letter was short, cold, carefully worded. It stated that certain roadway parcels within the neighborhood were privately owned and not controlled by the HOA. Neighbors finally understood, and 2 weeks later, the HOA president resigned. A new board took over. Their first action wasn't another threat. It was a request. They asked for a formal long-term maintenance agreement, this time politely, respectfully, and on my terms, because in the end, they finally learned something simple. Power isn't about who makes the loudest threats. It's about who actually owns the ground everyone else is standing on.